Happy coding.
Hey there, and welcome to our next video in our series of like intro to web development. In the last video, we talked about JavaScript and how to get that in your page and how to run that and stuff. And in this video, I'm going to build on that, and we are going to learn about the concept of variables, which lets you like store data that you can use in your code. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in. Okay, so what do I have? I have, hopefully you just watched the last video and you are familiar with like calling JavaScript and stuff, and I'm like building right off of that. So I have the same exact file that I was working on in that video. I've got some HTML and I've got my script tag that's loading this script.js file. And then in my script.js file, I have, a couple lines of JavaScript. So then I have that sort of open in its own tab over here, just so I can like control when it auto refreshes. So I'm going to refresh, and indeed I, see the results of my JavaScript either printed to the console or written directly to the page. Okay, so I'm going to build on that. So before I talk about variables, let's maybe talk more about values. So I threw a couple of concepts at you in the last video without like really explaining them. And that was the concept of like types. So variables or values, can have types. So we saw we saw a number like 42, and we saw like a string like hello world, or any text message. And these are values. These are like things that you put in your code that the browser can like treat as like a thing to either pass to a argument, or pass as an argument to a function, or to like display in the page. And it kind of works, I think, how you might expect. If you write 42, it's 42. If you write the text hello world, it's hello world. But behind the scenes, a computer is like a really fancy calculator. And so you can also do math with this stuff. So let's say I wanted to, I don't know, multiply two numbers together. So I wanted like 23 times 2. I am typing two values, the value 23 and the value 2. And then the operator, in this case, it's like the multiplication operator, which is like the asterisk symbol in this case. And the computer will take that and do that math, or perform that operation, and do that before it passes that value, the resulting value, into the document.write function. So now if I go over here, if I refresh, I see 46 here because that is the result of 23 times 2. And you're not limited to multiplication. So, if you wanted to have a plus sign in here, that's cool. So if I refresh over here, indeed, this is 23 plus 2. That, probably makes sense. And with numbers, it's fairly what you would expect. But the thing I want to sort of cover next is the idea of using operators on strings, on non numeric types. So if I have a string hello world, document.write hello world, you probably can guess what that does. That writes hello world to the page. But what if I had something like hello and then a plus sign and then world, like that? I have a value hello and a value world, and there's also a space here. You kind of can't really see it, but there's a space there. And then a plus sign. So I'm adding two strings. What does that do? Well, with code, the nice thing is we can just go look at what it does. So let's hit refresh over here, and it's not going to be super exciting, but you get the same result. So maybe I'll make this a little more interesting by saying like, hello, Kevin. And I'll refresh. And indeed, you see hello and then Kevin. And that works because JavaScript has this sort of built-in rule, I guess, where when you use the plus operator on two strings, it sort of smushes them together and gives you like a new string. So similar to how you can say like 42 plus 2, and it'll add them together and give you 44. In this case, you can say hello plus Kevin, and it will give you the full string, hello Kevin, sort of appended together. This is called the append operator. Okay, so you can use values and operators on different types, on numbers, on strings. We'll talk about more types later. And it's all good. One thing I'll point out is like spaces kind of matter. So if I just have the string hello with no space inside of it, like I've got a space here, right? And I've got a space here, and I've got the string Kevin, what happens? And if I refresh, you'll see that it's just the whole thing, hello Kevin. So your spaces need to be like inside your strings if you want them in your like resulting string, but you'll discover that. All right, so that's sort of using operators. We could talk about type coercion. I'll maybe just talk about that really quickly. So you've seen like hello Kevin. What if I have hello plus the number 42? What should happen here? I don't know. What do you think happens? Think to yourself what you would expect. And then I'm going to hit refresh over here. And I see hello and then 42. So in this case, it is basically treating the 42 as a string. And it's saying like, just adding the characters, the letters in a way, 4 and 2 to the letters in hello to result in, hello 42. What would happen if I had something like, I don't know, 52 plus 42. So now my 52 is a string and my 42 is a number. What do you expect to happen? And I'm going to just find out. Refresh. And here I have 52, 42 because it's seeing that this is a string and then it is treating this as a string as well. Okay. Let's see. Let's try some other ones. JavaScript is kind of fun this way. What if I have multiplication? What is 52, the string, multiplied by 42, the number? I don't know. Let's find out. And if I hit refresh, it is some number, which is the result of 52. Maybe I should have used better numbers that are a little easier. Maybe I'll do 2 and 3. So the string 2 multiplied by the number 3 is indeed 6. So this is the idea of type coercion, which, maybe isn't super important to know right off the bat, but it's the idea that JavaScript will try to guess at what you want with your types based on the operator that you use and the types that are like used with that operator. So if you notice something a little wonky with like, hey, wait a second, why is my number this or why is my string that? It could be that there's something fishy with type coercion. So the way to get around this is to just always use the correct type. Like if you want it to be a number, use a number. If you want it to be a string, make it a string. Okay, so that's variables, or that's values and sort of type coercion. And now sort of the whole point of this is to talk about creating variables. So far I've used values and I've passed those values in as arguments or parameters to my functions. But now what if I wanted to store them so that I can like reuse them in multiple places? So I'm going to create a variable. So I have, I'm just setting myself up with a new line of code here, and I'm going to create a variable. And again, we're in JavaScript, so I'm going to use JavaScript syntax. And we've talked about this a little bit in class where like there's a whole history of web development. So there's often multiple ways to do something. And it's because like in 1993, you did it one way, in 2024, you kind of do it a different way. So how you currently create a variable generally is with the let keyword. So I'm going to type let and then a space, and I'm going to give my variable a name. This can be pretty much whatever I want. Variable names usually start with a lowercase letter, and then we'll use like capital letters for any subsequent words. So I'm going to say like, I don't know, like my name, and then an equals sign, and then a value. So it's going to be, 34 if you want a number. Or if I want a string, I can say Kevin. Maybe I'll put my full name just to be a little more interesting. And then a semicolon. So this line of code creates a variable that contains or references or points to the value, the string value, Kevin Workman. And now I can use this variable anywhere I could use a value. So now instead of document.write, I can say document.write my name. And I'm going to go over here and refresh. Now there it is, Kevin Workman up there. So I am storing this value in a variable so that I can, have it referenced in one place, and I can then reuse it in multiple functions. So let's say I wanted to just blast this name everywhere. So I've got document.write. I'm also going to say console.log my name. And then we'll also do alert my name. So these are 3 functions we talked about in the last video. So this code is going to, first off, create this variable, and then it's going to write that variable to the actual page, to the document. It's going to write that same exact variable, or the value that the variable contains, to the console. And then finally, it's going to show a pop-up box with that same value. So if I hit refresh over here, indeed, I see it blasted all over the place. I see Kevin Workman here in the pop-up box. I see it over here in the console. Can I zoom in? Yeah, there we go. Here it is in the console. And finally, if I hit OK, I also see it here in the page. So that is the idea of creating a variable and then using it in multiple places. And the value of that is, let's say I wanted to change that to, I should have come up with a clever name ahead of time. I don't know. Oscar the Grouch. Notice that I only had to change it in one place here, in one line of code, and the rest of the code will just work. It'll automatically update because I'm storing that value in this variable and then using it in multiple places. So if I refresh over here, I see Oscar the Grouch in this pop-up. I see Oscar the Grouch over here. And if I hit OK, I see Oscar the Grouch over here. So that's kind of one of the big benefits of using variables, is you can sort of store them in one place, and then you can use, you can write code that uses those variables in multiple places. So another thing you can do is sort of mix and match like operators and variables and fields. So I don't know, let's see, let's say I wanted to have one, variable that's my name, and I want to create, a new variable that's called like I want to call it like my message. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but as long as it's like one, continuous series of letters. You can't have spaces in your variable names, for example. But I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to set it equal to the value of maybe the text hello, like the string value hello, and then the plus operator or the append operator, since I'm dealing with strings, and then my name. And so I'm creating a new variable that's called my message that contains the string value, which is the result of appending the string value hello to the string variable my name, which itself contains Oscar the Grouch. So then I can use my message, down here. And yeah, let's go refresh. And now what I should see is here I see hello Oscar the Grouch. Here I see hello Oscar the Grouch. And then finally here I see hello Oscar the Grouch. So that is using and mixing and matching variables with values and operators. I think the next or maybe last thing I'll talk about is the other big thing that variables gets you is the ability to sort of get input from the user when you don't know the value ahead of time. So let's say, I've used my name and I've used Oscar the Grouch because for some reason that was the first name that came to my mind. But let's say I didn't know the user's name ahead of time. I'm going to put this out there on the internet. I don't know who's going to visit my page. I don't know their name. And in fact, I want it to be different depending on who it is. How would I do that? And the answer is using variables. So I'm going to, yeah, I'll keep it my name for now. I'm tempted to say like username. Yeah, I will change it actually. Username, and sure, message is fine. So instead of setting this equal to the hard-coded value Oscar the Grouch, I'm going to use a new function which asks the user a question. So I'm going to call that function, which is called prompt, and then I'm going to give it an argument. And in here, I'm going to say, what is your name? And maybe I'll like briefly use this as a chance to talk about something that comes up a lot in these early exercises. And that is like, what if I want it to be, what's your name? We've talked about how strings use single quotes, and, this string itself contains a single quote. So, how do you get around that? There are a couple ways. One way is to escape it. So you use a left-leaning slash. I think that's a backslash. And that tells the browser basically like, yeah, treat this as an actual quotation mark, like not an indicator that it's the end of the string. So you can do it that way. The other way you can do it is by using double quotation marks on the outside of your string. So if I have double quotation marks and I clean up glitches autocomplete stuff, now my string uses double quotation marks. So if there is a single quote inside of it, it's okay. And the inverse is true as well. If you want to have your string contain a double quotation marks, then you use single quotes. So usually single quotes are the default, but you can use double quotes if you want. So anyway, all right, that was a random tangent. But now I am creating a variable named username, and I'm setting it equal to the value that I get when I call the prompt function, and I'm passing in the argument, what's your name, to that prompt function. So I store that in username, and then I use that in the rest of my code just like I was before. So if I go over here and refresh, now I have this pop-up, and I don't have a good way to zoom into that pop-up, but hopefully you can see that in the video. It's really small, but it says, what's your name here? And it gives me a text field, and I can type in, whatever I want. So I don't know, I'm looking around for someone whose name I can use. Maybe I'll just say Elmo. I don't know why. I typed in Elmo there, so I'm gonna hit OK. And now I see a new pop-up that says, hello, Elmo. I see hello, Elmo over here. And if I hit OK here, then I'll see hello, Elmo up there as well. So this is the idea of like storing data that I didn't have ahead of time, and if I sent that page to you, you could type in whatever name you wanted and it would be unique to you. And my code does not know ahead of time what the value is going to be. But because I'm using variables, I don't really need to care what the value is going to be because, my code works with variables, not with hard-coded values. So that's like a big benefit of using variables. That's kind of why we are learning about them. Okay, so the last thing I'll mention is I briefly touched on this before, and that is, the idea that there's like many ways to do everything in web development or in programming in general. And it's because like JavaScript was not created in a single day and then it was done and here it is and it never changed. JavaScript has evolved over time. Same way with HTML has evolved over time. CSS has evolved over time. There's a group of folks called the World Wide Web Consortium whose job it is to sort of decide how do these languages change. And there's like a whole process for like debating and deciding and all that stuff, but it has changed quite a bit. So if you're looking at like a JavaScript tutorial, you might see some of those other ways, and I don't want that to catch you off guard. So I'll briefly mention them here. So I am recommending as a default for pretty much everything we do to just use the let keyword. That will get you pretty far. Say let and then variable name and then an equal sign and then whatever you want it to be. But there are some other ways. So you might see the var or var keyword. And it's pretty much the same. It's creating a variable and, it's all good. This is the older way to do it. and it comes with some weird side effects that you won't have to worry about right now. But as you make your code like more involved and more complex, var like comes with some weirdness. So generally, folks don't really use it anymore. They usually use the let keyword. The other keyword you might see is the const keyword. So const, again, it just creates a variable, but the sort of extra thing that it does here is that now you can no longer change the value of a variable. So if I have let and I say username equals prompt and then I do some stuff, I can later say like username equals, whatever. And, I can keep going. Like I can change the value of a variable if I use let or var. If I use const, then it won't let me. I'll actually get an error message if I try to run this code. And let's actually run that and see that in action. So if I hit refresh and I'm just going to type in Kevin here and then I hit OK and I then hit OK here. Yeah, here we go. Here's my error message. Uncaught type error, invalid assignment to const username. And this is there as like a safety mechanism. Like if you're writing code and especially if other people are going to use that code, you don't want them to be able to change a variable by accident. So you would use the const keyword. Again, for us though, for you, for what you are doing, I think just sticking with let is totally fine. The other way that you might see it done is not using any keyword at all. And this will technically work, but don't do it this way because it leads to some weirdness in other things. So what I would say, always use the let keyword, and that will get you pretty far into what we need to worry about in what we're learning about. Okay, so that was variables and sort of creating variables and storing values in them. We also talked about like operators and how they work with different types, either numbers or strings. And we even talked about like storing data that you get from the user using this like prompt function, and then storing that data in a variable and then using that variable in your code. So I'm going to leave it there for this video, but we will continue to build on this to get to like more and more interesting things. But for now, thanks for watching. And as always, happy coding.